All right, tonight, first of all, I'm going to start with, do you have any questions? This is the last week of class. Everything needs to be turned in, and most of you are there. There's just a few assignments that the ones that I can't get to, or it won't record a grade. I've just got those. A few of you have some more work to turn in, but most of you are in really good shape. Everything has to be turned in by Tuesday of next week. If you can get it in by Monday, that would be wonderful. But Tuesday is the very last day. I think most of you have received your scores back from TaskStream. Is that correct? Okay. So you're in good shape as far as the work is. If I find that there's not work that there's work that's not been completed, I will send you a personal email. I'll be checking on that toward the end of the week after most everyone has got everything finished. So if you don't have any questions, we'll go straight into the case study 4 presentations. And I just looked at the order I'd started with before, and I started with a different group. So, we'll start with group 2. And if one of you wants to take over the sharing and share from your computer, we will proceed on with that. So group 2.
We had the last 3 questions, but we have a little overview for everything. We'll start off with, how might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? We said that principals need to explain the purpose of special education in their school and what their teachers' roles will be in serving all students. And underneath that, you need to have a school policy, know the district policy or the goals, and the mission of the needs to be explained and understood, so everybody's all on the same page and that everybody's going along with what the district's policy is, and even the state as well. Teachers should reach a consensus on how special ed services will be delivered in and out of the classroom. Teachers need to fully understand what is required of them and what services they should be providing to all students. In this case study, there were just too many opinions that were going around and too many feelings on how things should be handled. We can't put our personal feelings into things. We have to go by what is in place for specific students and not go off of that. The principal may need to have teachers and special educators collaborate to identify those children and determine when and how the service delivery of those children will be addressed, whether it's inclusion or pull-out services to allow the least restrictive environment, and if services will be delivered daily. The principal needs to know the students and determine the service delivery of all identified students to determine how special education services will be delivered. This will also allow the principal to have say of which kind of services they'll offer in a school. Sometimes some schools will specialize in autistic needs. Some do hearing impaired, and if they don't have those, they can get the students where they need to be or make sure those services are pulled in to assist those students. Communication should have been sent out regarding the fact that the kids were placed in the class as part of the integration program. This may help with the headache of parents coming to the principal in this situation and not understanding why their child is put into a class with these other children and what's taking place. It should have been discussed at the beginning of the school year or whenever this child came in, that this was a practice that they were going to do at the school. The next part is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? The approach should be determined based off the children. I know at our school that we try to group the needs of the children together. So if they have speech services, to eliminate the speech pathologist from going from several classrooms during a time period, we try to put those children in one room if they're in the same grade level. So she's just pulling from one class, and then vice versa with the special education teacher that does provide services. Approach is determined by those needs identified on an IEP. If a student has services delivered for both inclusion and special education, how will those needs be met? Although this is driven by how it is communicated on the IEP. There isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Not everything that you put in place is going to work for every child. So those IEP goals are specific to that child, and sticking to those should benefit those child in their educational needs. And there can be some autonomy, but overall the school should have a consistent plan on how students' needs will be met.
All right. I have the next one.
Brittany, is Brittany the one trying to talk?
Yes, ma'am, and she's actually traveling right now.
They need to have.
Okay, I'm not
Can you hear me
getting
now?
her information very well. Okay, try again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Right now I can.
Okay. The principal.
It's like it's locking up every once in a while.
I can cover her slides.
All right, Blair, go ahead and do that.
Okay, so what is the path that Eugenia should take? So we said common plan for delivery of services, so her IEP and 504 plans.
Approach needs to lead teachers to adopting it.
And so then we said children with disabilities are needing so much attention that other students are suffering, that perhaps those students need a different model of instruction. So we talked about the principal needs to lead the teachers.
For delivery of services.
Hold on, let me text her. And so perhaps those students need a different model of instruction. So acquire more assistance to assist those classrooms. So the teacher and principal, they need to lead adopting a common plan delivery of services based on best practices.
Stop.
Okay. Barry, can you get the next one? So what is the path that she should take? And we talked about this. If a student's setting must change, the IEP must change. So making sure those services will vary based on a child. Some should stay in the regular classroom with help from a specialist or a teacher aide. Some may need more intensive intervention in a smaller class. There should be common plan in place for grade levels and or the entire school. And I know this is something that we're working on a lot right now at our school, is special ed services are meeting to make sure everybody's on the same page and the services carry through, because we're seeing a lot of inconsistency being in a district so large that if they transfer one school to the other, then it's a totally different ball game depending on the location. So we're working on these things as well. Is one point of view more correct than the other, and why? And so we said there are various viewpoints. You know, you have the principal, the teacher, and the parents. And so who has the correct viewpoint? We kind of discussed this in various ways. You know, we feel that the principal should obviously be the one leading, but then the teacher should also have the voice because they are the ones who are generally, you know more about the subject area and the accommodations needed. I'm sorry. And then, of course, the parents as well being the advocate for the students. And what kind of collaboration from their children's families? So this was one of the questions. Might the principal and the teachers propose in order to improve the inclusion education program? And we said encourage, appreciate the diversity, stimulate learning for all students at the school. So parent volunteers, provide training for teachers, provide social activities for families, opportunities for parents to provide with the tools to help support and remediate and reinforce. And then we said one thing they could do is host a parent night. And with the parent night, it could explain their program goals, give examples, and make sure to set clear expectations for everyone involved. Other ways could be, you know, you have tutors, assistants, in-service training as a whole. I know our teachers need just as much training as anyone else, especially if they are inclusion. So that way they're all on the same page in the classroom. Scaffold lessons, and provide update information to families of students with disabilities on department initiatives, community resources, and parent education.
All right, so as an expert in the area of learning and evaluation, what might Ismail, the technical coordinator, do to integrate and create some harmony out of the differences in the opinion among the teachers? So we said to conduct classroom observations. We said conduct classroom observations. The expert provides strategies that can be utilized in the classroom. Talk about unifying teachers in the school to establish expectations. So I'm sure it's this way for most people, but in our school system, the first day we're all back in the building together before the kids get in, we have 3 or 4 hours to meet as a PLC to just discuss and establish expectations in general. And then lastly, we could coordinate a meeting with himself or Sylvia, a specialist is necessary to help address the concerns. Next, so we talked about what actions might the families of the children in question, what they might need to do in order and learn and share the achievements and their experiences. A parent night, which we have had a lot of success with in our district. Student-led conferences, we haven't seen that. I've not seen that as much, but I think that would be great. Class meetings, and then lastly, there's always your traditional parent-teacher conference, and then awards, rewards, celebrations of learning. I know in my district, we just really took an initiative to take on PBIS. So that's really worked, having field days at the end of school if a certain grade level was to behave and meet their scores needed.
All right, does anyone else have do you have any questions for them, or anybody else want to make a comment about their presentation? Okay, I want to take just a minute to talk about the student-led conferences. That is not a new idea. There was actually a book written about it, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was started out with high school students. And it was actually started out at East Forsyth High School in Forsyth County. And the principal there believed very strongly that if the students had the information and they could share with their parents at the school about what they were doing and what they needed to work on, that it would be far more effective than the teacher meeting with the parents. And so the principal at that time had a lot of success with it, and there was actually a book written about it. It was a small little paperback book that told how they did it. But it was really interesting. The parents took so much interest in coming that some of the ones who normally would never come to school, their kids wanted them to be there so badly that they hired taxis to bring them to the school because they didn't have transportation. Now, I don't know when that principal left, whether they kept it up or not, but it has been around for a while. We actually tried it in some of our schools when I was the superintendent. And if you took the time and the teachers were all on the same page with you and you trained your children, then it went really well. And the parents came and the students were able to say, this is what I did well, this is what I still need to work on. So if you're all on the same page, it is a very good tool. So I encourage you, if you are, when you become a principal, if you're having trouble getting parents to come to your school, especially to talk about their kids' academics, do some research and find some of the information from about student-led conferences, and it will take you back to the late 90s, early 2000s, where it first originated or where there was first stuff written about it. Okay, let's go on to our next group. If no one else has anything to add to that, will be group 1.
right, does that show up?
Yeah, we got him.
All right.
All right, I'll get the ball rolling here with this one. So the summary of this case was: a school is known for its integration program of its special needs students. They started to get worrisome questions from parents of students who were not special needs, and they felt that their children were falling behind because they had to help with the special needs students and their assignments. So these questions are brought to the principal's attentions at a parents association meeting. From there, the principal met with the teacher in question, but also told her technical coordinator about the parents' concern. So during the initial meeting between the teacher in question and principal, the technical coordinator went around to the other teachers in the building to get their feedback on the situation. The principal then scheduled a meeting for all the teachers to ease the tension between the integration program and the parent association concerns, and other tensions between teachers that are in the integration program and that warrant. So the first question that we had was: how might the principal approach this and future meetings with their teachers? Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? So we said the principal needs to address further meetings with unbiased opinions, treating each educator fairly with as much neutrality as possible. You got to try not to favor any other teacher, to kind of pit the staff against one another there. It could be unhealthy for the school and all those included. All different teaching approaches should be appreciated and valued because there are many ways to reach our children so they are able to become successful. The principal should not put another teacher against the other. This creates animosity in the culture. The principal needs to address the parents and make them realize that there are ways to teach in many different effective ways. It's kind of like what the other group said too. I think they had a very good idea of making sure if you're going to implement this program to maybe roll it out in the beginning so all the parents are informed. I thought that was good, and I also thought that, something maybe a different approach, maybe have the coordinator with her at the time too, or have everybody together instead of singling out that one. So that's the first question there.
All right. The second question here was asking what is the path that Eugenia should take. We said that she should she should meet with all the teachers to make sure they have enough support to meet the needs of both their special needs students and their regular education students. The overall goal of all teachers should be that all of their students are learning. She needs to make certain that teachers are being fully supported throughout the school. The inclusion classroom should have a sufficient amount of support services in place to meet the needs of all the students in the classrooms. And some of those supports we thought were things like educational consultants, teacher assistants, peer-age tutors, peer helpers, instructional coaches, educators associated with disabilities, special educators orientation to make sure they're prepared for the upcoming school year, and mobility specialists for specific impairments depending on the student's needs. Then once she has an understanding from her teachers, then she can come up with a plan, and she should share this plan with the parents and assure them that the school's priority is to meet the needs of every student. And then the last question we had to answer was, is one point of view more correct than the other, and why? No, not necessarily. While both teachers have a different idea regarding the work being conducted in the school for inclusive classrooms, the end goal is the same. Meeting the needs of the students' individualized education plan, adhering to the course of study requirements, and ensuring the overall success of the students with special needs as well as those who require no additional needs is what all the educators are doing. Through the use of specialists and allowing students to share in the process of educating their peers are both great ways to aid in the success of all students in the school.
All right, does anybody have any questions or comments to add to that? All right, we'll go to group 3.
Okay, we have group 3. We had questions 1 through 3. How might the principal approach this in future meetings with her teachers? We said that they need to revisit the mission statement of the school and discuss that. Also have teachers collaborate with other grade levels when it comes to planning or for inclusion or any kind of special education lessons and that kind of thing. Educate teachers and get them on the same page with the facts about who is responsible for the education of the EC students, since it is not just the EC teacher's responsibility, and then educate parents on the laws. They need to provide PD for the teachers who do not understand their role as an educator of EC students. According to law, special ed students must be educated in the least restrictive environment, and the assumption must be made that every student's placement is in the regular education classroom. And they need to look at the best placement for all students, whether it is inclusion or if it is pull out. Can you guys hear Tisha?
No, I can't hear Tisha.
Or screen's muted.
I'm sorry. I'm working and I'm doing this. Okay. Is it necessary to choose one approach over the other? None of the approaches in their entirety can be chosen over the other because they all have valid points. But they need to do what is in the best interest of all students. The teachers seem to want to make teaching in a way that is convenient for themselves as opposed to what is in the best interest of the children. Through training on collaboration and buy-in from the negative teachers, proper solutions and modification of assignments and proper placement of students would allow for more cohesive teaching approach for the benefit of the students.
Is Cindy muted too?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. What is the path that Eugenia should take? Eugenia could continue with the mission of the school, which is to provide a learning environment for all the children to receive educational services. And then just put in there about the role of the principal, the powers and duties of the principal to improve instruction and the community spirit. The principal shall have suggestions to the teachers for improvement instruction. And it's the responsibility of the principal to provide suggestions on collaboration for regular and inclusion teachers to provide the best education opportunities for those students to learn and grow. And provide teacher development opportunities that assist regular and inclusion teachers on how to collaborate and enhance the helping kids approach. And according to events and future, peer learning has proven to be effective, and they stated that students oftentimes learn better from their peers.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, is one point of view more correct than the other, and why? First, we thought Sylvia is correct in her practice of having peer tutors. Both the higher and lower performing kids benefit from this. And then we had some benefits, and then we documented some resources that benefit having both lower and high performing kids in the classroom. And then we thought that if Sylvia's only way of differentiating instruction was to have students working in workbooks, then maybe she did need to put more emphasis on enrichment for the more advanced students through the independent studies.
Okay, anybody have anything to add or any questions? Okay, that takes us to the last group, group 4. We're moving quite along rapidly tonight. So, group 4.
I guess I'll start us out. Sorry, I had muted myself.
It's fine. I'll start, Brian. Okay, we had questions 4, 5, and 6. So taking a look at this question here, talking about what kind of collaboration from the children's family might the principal and the teacher propose in order to improve the inclusion education program. I stated the second bullet point. I'll let Anthony or Brian hit the first one. But with the second bullet point, at our school, we host an open house in the fall where the students and their parents go on an abbreviated schedule. So they actually rotate through each class. So this could be done. It's like 10 minutes in each class. The teachers have a opportunity to present how instruction is done throughout the day, because sometimes parents don't actually know what's going on in the classroom, how instruction is taught. So this kind of opens up a pathway for them to kind of comprehend how instruction is done on a daily basis. So hosting an open house event where parents can learn how inclusion, differentiated instruction is done in the classroom could help, facilitate this process of them understanding how their students are learning and progressing.
When we talked about it, we realized if we're going to include the technical director, the whole case study had a running theme of lack of communication to parents, between admin and staff, and between staff of the different grade levels. So we were of the approach of maybe they could set up a meeting with the concerned parents so that the teacher could then explain her methodology in depth to the ones that have those concerns, so that then there's a true understanding, not just the belief that, well, my kid is not getting the same education. You see the little note at the bottom, we want to let cooler heads prevail first, because she was obviously upset when this was even mentioned to her, or she was questioned about it. So, you don't want her going in there angry, trying to then present herself, because it's going to take a defensive stance. More of a, why are you questioning me, versus a, well, this is really what I'm doing, and this is how these children will benefit from it. And then I let her draw on her experience from her previous time in Santiago, so she can really explain how it benefited those students and will now benefit her current students.
I'll go ahead and take number 5 here. So we got Ishmael here, who is our technical coordinator. And when we had our discussions of kind of what direction to go in, I know we've got our answers here, but one personally stood out to me, because I know this case study heavily focused on more time being spent on students on the lower end of the spectrum. However, what also needs to be questioned is, being that this is an elementary school, we had discussed the idea of AIG, the academically and intellectually gifted. I was an AIG instructor for the first few years of my teaching experience. And in this instance, around 3rd grade is when a lot of these students are being actually tested for, EC accommodations, for being AIG identified. So not only do we potentially have these students who might not be having time specifically spent on them in comparison to other students getting more attention from their teacher, but maybe it's not the fact that the students aren't being challenged to the level of rigor in the regular ed, but maybe they actually are academically and intellectually gifted. And from that standpoint, that technical coordinator should actually be able to kind of start looking into that and discussing with other teachers if those instances are occurring across the board. That was just something personally for me with my experience. As far as our other responses, we firmly and heavily believe that some type of rotation schedule needs to be created to allow every single teacher the opportunity to go in and observe. I know, we put 1 to 2 planning periods per week, and that there would be quarterly debrief sessions, but those numbers, those frequencies can easily be changed. It just needs to have the opportunity for every single teacher to be able to observe their peers and kind of view those best practices and be able to identify areas of need that can be discussed in a constructive manner. And then clearly, the encouragement and inclusion of that PLC, that professional learning community. So this way we again have best practice strategies being utilized across every grade level throughout that school.
And with the cross grade level PLC, our county specifically just started something with the SREB where we're even taking it down from high school to middle school so that we can start building on the things that they need from the previous grades or what the expectations are. Because I believe from the way the case study read, a lot of this was a lack of understanding of expectations from one grade level to the next and what their different goals were in terms of achieving the overall picture of educating the child. And then for the last one, we had the action she should take. Number one, it's all about communication. Like, as I read it, the first thing that struck me was, why would they go to the principal first if they had, comfort in talking to her? And the way it read was a lack of communication from teacher to parent and parent to teacher, which goes back into the principal should have probably suggested, well, have you spoken with this teacher? Just as a professional courtesy, trying to open up the communication doorway versus immediately going to her and, setting her on a defensive, which doesn't help anybody in this situation. So focusing on getting her to talk to the parents, send out some information so that the parents can see where it's at. I'm still curious what these parents were basing their judgment on to say, well, obviously our kids aren't scoring as well. Are they making that data publicly available? Say, well, this class has more points than that class. How did they get that perception? So that's a huge part, and a lot of that comes from a lack of communication. And then for the conference, we said that, we want to moderate that. We don't want to walk in and it be a us versus them mentality, because obviously Sylvia is a little touchy when it comes to how she teaches. And you don't want that to turn into a situation where there's hostility or a defensiveness that, ends communication before anything constructive can come out of it.
Right. So like when the meeting takes place, obviously these parents are concerned that their children are not being served or learning as they should. So the teacher should be prepared to show evidence that these children are in fact learning and that they're thriving in that classroom environment. She could use formative assessments to show the progress monitoring, or she could show summative assessments or, end of grade if they have some form of a end of grade assessment or benchmark or something of that nature. So she can show that in fact your child is demonstrating the mastery of the skill. They're not falling behind. They're not, a teacher assistant for the class, but they actually are thriving and learning in that environment. So having that evidence will also help the teacher when she's communicating with the parents.
And then any questions, comments, concerns?
Okay. All right, you all have done a good job with that. On your agenda, I put some additional, let's see if I can get it to share. I put some questions for us to talk about at the bottom of this. These are just overall questions about the case study that you all worked on. First of all, have you had situations like this particular case study in your schools? And if you did, how did they work out? Anybody have something like this?
It wasn't on the level of the parents coming in angry, but we did have a teacher who communicating with parents was terrible, and it caused some issues for her across the course of a year. So, it was one of those situations where I got tasked with helping her figure out that happy median on what to call parents and tell them and what not to say and what to handle in her own room. But it wasn't anywhere near the level of that they were at the school screaming, with pitchforks.
Right. All right, anybody else? All right, I think one of the issues that as parents become more and more involved with their children, and you see it more each year with the younger children, then sometimes they just sort of fade away as they get older. But I think you may have some more of these kinds of things with people looking at special ed as reverse discrimination, if that makes any sense at all. In other words, these children are getting all this special attention, but we're letting the regular ed kids get no attention. We have special attention for the AIG students. We have special attention for special needs students, but the regular ed kid doesn't get anything special. So I think that that's something that you're going to have to be prepared to think about and deal with as our education system goes further. With more parents choosing to homeschool, with more parents choosing to send them to charter schools and public schools, I think these are all some of the issues that are going to be coming into play. When we first had experience with teachers, with parents removing their children from public schools and putting them in private schools, a lot of the times it was because of either the child received a bad grade and the parents were not willing to accept that maybe the child needed some help, or they had been identified for special needs services and the parent did not believe that, or they got in trouble. They were disciplined at school. And so they would move them to a private school, and then somewhere along the line, they'd get mad at the private school, and then they'd come back to the public schools, and then when you tested them, they were really far behind. Now, hopefully, our charter schools and our private schools are getting better. I don't know that they are, but hopefully they are. And so these are things that, as a school administrator, you're going to have to be willing to deal with. And you'll have to remember the school principal's job is to grade and classify. So you'll have to look at the law and see what you're allowed to do and your county policy when it comes to grading and classifying students. So if you receive a child who's 2 to 3 years behind, and you know there's not any possibility of them being able to be successful on the end of course test or end of grade test, if they happen to be in a tested grade, then you have some decisions to make. And then the reverse is also true. Sometimes you will have students that are AIG LD, and the LD has been what people have focused on, but the kid is really, really bright. They get to 7th grade, they're 14 or 15 years old. If you're not careful, they're going to drop out by the time they get to freshman year in high school. So there are times you need to look at jumping students from 7th grade to 9th grade and move them in the middle of the year so they can take that 8th grade test. A lot of these students can be very successful if they're truly AIG, but you've got to make sure you provide the help and support. So when you become a principal, it's not cut and dry, and it is not black and white. There are so many situations, and you have to look at it individually. You have to look at what's best for the students, the individual student, the group as a whole, and your school as a whole. And so you have to know what the law is. You have to know what the expectations are. In these unusual circumstances where you may have an AIG-LD, where you've served on one end, but you've not served on the other end, that's legal issues you could be dealing with. And in many situations when you're dealing with them at middle school or elementary school, you want to deal with them so you can get those children moved on. Now, a lot of times, if it is a parent who's very aware of their rights, it would not have gone on this long. But we're to look after all the children, not just the one whose parents are the most vocal. So those are some things I think you're going to wind up dealing with more often in the future than we have in the past. Now, did you notice where this case study was written from?
I did. I actually have spent a lot of time in Chile, which is kind of interesting. I have friends in Latin America, and they have come up and visited the school I work at, and the ones I had were from Brazil, and they constantly remark how much stuff we have. Chile, especially in Santiago, is very industrialized. It's considered a developed nation, whereas a lot of the Brazilians, they're not. The stuff that they have is 25, 30 years older than us. So it was one of those interesting. As soon as I saw it, I had to message a friend of mine, "Hey, we're doing a case study about your country. What can you tell me?" So it was kind of neat.
And I think that this was done intentionally to see if anyone really was paying attention. And I also think that they were expecting you to assume that it was the same laws and regulations that you have in the U.S. But that was just sort of there as a distractor. But you know, if you do get students from other countries, a lot of the times you'll get that in some of the near military bases and people who travel a lot, and migrant children. So you really have to look up what is expected in those situations. When you are dealing with schools in foreign countries, you brought out some of the things that you're dealing with, in that we have a lot more tools and we may be further along with technology than some of the more developing countries. What are some other issues other than technology, and whether it's an industrialized nation or something like that? What are some other issues that you might be dealing with if you get students from a foreign country?
Are you talking about if they were to come here from a foreign country?
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, a language barrier is a huge one.
Yes.
Especially in the first couple of years. We had a student 2 years ago who spoke very little English, and it was a very it was off-putting for him. He didn't really interact with a lot of people very well. Like he was in a shell, and it took some time to get him, once he started, learning English, was able to come out of that shell and, join the community better, but it took some time because he didn't really want to be here.
And it does take time, and it also takes understanding from us. At least you all went to the effort to try to get him out of his shell so you could really see what the child could do. So I commend you for doing that.
We have a really wonderful ESL person at our school. She is heavily in the community. So it's one of those like resources go to if there's a problem, if we can't get a parent, we immediately go to her. She's working wonders with a lot of our students. So it's really great to work with her. And it helps that, some of us are Spanish speakers. That is great.
But, you will encounter so many different things that you'll have to deal with. All right. I put the information here about Ishmael. Did you look at his age? What did it say his age was in the case study?
It's like 27, mid-20s.
Yeah, it's mid to late 20s. All right. Think about when I read this, I looked at Sylvia and I thought she seems to be someone who is older than 27 and had been there for a while. It doesn't say that, but that's just sort of what you picked up when you were reading it, or at least I don't remember seeing that it said how long she'd been there. How do you think that the teachers would accept him when you think about his age and the fact that they hadn't really seen him teaching? He was supposed to be interacting with them. So what kind of issues was he facing? Well, what different issues would he be dealing with?
So I kind of encountered this. I just turned 32 recently, but at my school, I'm actually one of the youngest people on the campus. And being that this past year I've been an administrative intern, observing teachers, giving, constructive criticism and trying to be that administrative role, I faced a lot of kickback at first from the more respected / feared senior teachers who kind of gave me the, what are you doing? This isn't your role kind of thing, to the point where I personally had to confront them and just remind them that at the end of the day, this is for the students. It doesn't matter learning experience. It doesn't matter teaching experience. It doesn't matter age, whatever the case may be, that I'm doing this in the best interest of the students. And I would assume that the technical coordinator in this case study would have been doing the same thing. He probably would have had to address Sylvia and the other teachers as well in the same manner that I had to. But the second I emphasized that to them, it was done. It was done. They simply viewed me as a support, as administration from that point.
Well, and another thing to look at, and you brought out a good point, there's another piece in part of it in addition to the age, and that is personality. Many times people will respond to different personalities differently. And if you come across as aggressive or as a know-it-all, then most of the time you're going to have some trouble with anybody that you're dealing with. So if you come across more congenial, willing to listen, then most of the time you'll be accepted a whole lot better. And I'll give you some examples from my work when I was a principal. I actually went to a school, and I was in my, I want to say, mid to late 30s when I became a principal. And in the first principalship that I had, my secretary was a whole lot older than me. Her husband was one of my teachers, not one of the best teachers, but one of my teachers. And he had a lot of clout, and she did too, because they were from there in the community. And I was new to the community. And then I also had the wife of the previous principal who got moved, and he did not want to be moved. And so I had all of those dynamics to deal with. And when I first met the former principal's wife, she said, well, I really didn't want you here. I want my husband here, but I'll work with you now that you're here. Well, the funny thing about it, I looked at her and I said, I didn't ask for this school. I said, this is where they sent me. And I said, I just wanted to be a principal. I really didn't care what school it was in this county. And that just sort of broke the ice. And then from there on, and when I left, we were best friends. And, you know, she said, I really hate to see you go. You have been so good for us. And the other thing is, they had only had men principals in that particular school. And so the postmaster told me when I left, he said, I wouldn't have given 10 cents for you when you were assigned out here, because he said, I thought a female in this community, they'll never accept her. But he said, I will tell you, I really hate to see you go, because I never heard anything bad about your school or you while you were here. And he said, to me, that speaks volumes, because he said, before you were here, they were talking about everybody all the time. So I think you don't know the impression you make with others sometimes, but everybody's looking. And you just have to work through. And sometimes when you're confronted with a teacher who's more aggressive, like the teacher said, I don't want you here, you have to look beneath that and see what's really behind it. And what was behind it, it was she had nothing against me. And she went ahead and said that. She said, I have nothing against you. I don't know you. But she said, I really hate for my husband to have been moved to another school. And so when I told her, I said, I just wanted to be a principal. I didn't care where they put me. I didn't ask for the school. That just sort of let everything smooth out. And one of the things that all of you need to remember is you work for a school system. Unless you are in a particular school system that only has 2 or 3 schools, like a private school or a charter school system, they can send you wherever they choose to send you. Your contract is with the district. It is not for a school. You may be hired by a principal at a school, and you work for that principal as long as they're there and as long as you're there. But you can be moved, and there is nothing wrong with that. And many times the move is best for you more so than anything else. So just keep that in mind, and sometimes you might actually have to remind teachers of that too. You know, you work for the school system, so you need to do what they're asking you to do. So we talked a little bit about what you can do to be accepted by teachers, and a little bit about how to win negative teachers. Anybody got anything else to add about what you could do to win over those negative teachers if you were in this? It would be sort of like a clinic or like a coach role that many school systems have now. Have you seen anybody offer some offer some ways, or actually use different techniques that helped them win over negative teachers? Anybody? I see some smiles, so I know you're thinking about some. Anybody want to share any? Just remember a lot of it has to do with personalities. So be careful how you come across to people. And people will even misread you when you're just being straightforward. Sometimes they don't know how to deal with that. So be prepared for all of those kinds of situations, because you'll probably have to deal with them. All right, we have just about 10 minutes. I think that you all pointed out a couple of things in that lack of communication was an ongoing theme, and I think you're exactly right. Lack of communication causes more issues for schools and school systems than anything else that there is. So people will hear stuff, they'll repeat stuff, it's gossip, they'll believe stuff that's not the truth, and when you give them the truth, they would rather believe the lie. So just be prepared for that, and as much as possible, if you want to get facts out, put them in written word. I used to tell my teachers, I said, if you don't write it down, and I used to tell my principals the same thing, if you don't write it down, it probably didn't happen in all practical purposes if it has to go to court. Yes, it did happen, but if you didn't write it down and don't have good notes and good examples of what happened, you might as well just forget it, because it's not going to be looked up and listened to, and there will always be those who will counteract and say, well, now that didn't happen like that. Another thing that one of you brought out was the having high school to middle school conferences. I think that's a great idea. I actually did some of that one year, but I had a bad experience with it. And I want to just warn you of this. Our 8th grade teachers met with our 9th grade teachers, and I was there, and so I was in the role of assistant superintendent at that time over high school curriculum. And so the elementary coordinator and I had met together, and we thought it'd be a good idea for the teachers to get together, that we're going to be primarily working with the freshmen when they came in, and the teachers of the 8th grade students. And so we set it up, and we asked them to talk about what kinds of techniques worked with the students, what helped them grow the most, and those kinds of things. Well, we broke them up in groups, and it quickly became, you've got to be careful about this student. This student does this student does that. And I told my elementary coordinator, I said, we're never doing this one again. I said, our intent was good. We had it set up good, but it did not have the follow through. So as long as she or I were near the group, then it stayed where it should have been. But we couldn't be there because we had them in so many different rooms in the building. So teachers are just like students sometimes, and you have to keep that in mind when you become a principal. And you have to keep them on task, otherwise it'll go by the wayside. So if you can figure out and do a better job than we did, I think it's a great idea. But be prepared to admit, oh, that didn't go well, so I'm not going to do that again. So I just wanted to, you actually reminded me of that. All right, I wanted to just briefly introduce to you task 3 of the skip, which is something that you'll be doing in the early part of the fall. And I haven't had a group like you all in over a year that actually wants to be ahead and be prepared. So since you all are so good about getting your work done, I wanted to go ahead and, while you're in between the school year and also before your fall semester starts, give you the rest of the brief notes about the skip. Last week I attached task 1 and task 2 to your agenda, and this week I've attached task 3 and task 4. So task 3 is your marketing plan, and you're using the 3 things that you've already done in the first part of the tasks. And in this, right here is what should be in your subheadings: purpose for the plan, strengths of the current program, and how it can enhance the image of the school. And remember, this is about the school within the community. And how can the community, how can you get input from them when you're making decisions? and what are the opportunities they have for coming into your school, and when are you going to do this? And then what's your feedback component? Now, I think normally when Dr. Lamb is wanting this one done, he's actually looking for, in this task, an event that you will do at your school sometime after near the end of the completion of this task. And since you're going to be doing 2 this next semester, you're going to be doing the skip and the cap unless something has changed in 604. That is, you probably have about mid-semester to try to get this activity completed so you could write about it. So you'd want to do it the first half of your fall semester. So it is something where you can get the community, the parents, into your school for some event that's dealing with communication and the needs of your school. And then competencies, it's not any different from what we have had. I think I've had questions about, well, we didn't have to do this previously. Well, you may not have done it previously and you may have gotten by, but the rubric has said the same thing all the way through. And I said this in introducing it. I said it in so many of your entries that I wanted to go ahead and say this before you do it so that you don't have to go back and add anything. Remember, this is your reflection. And the direction for the task says reflect on work completed. Now, it does say the skip and the cap, but if they have you do the skip first, which I think they will, that's what they've been doing, then you may not have much references to the cap. So listen to what your professor tells you regarding that. If it's due before you start on the cap, just reference the skip. You are to critically analyze your development as a leader, and it says by applying course content to clinical experiences in your narrative. So that's where I'm saying, don't forget, this is your artifact, it is your course content, and it is your internship. The competency folio is where all your evidences go, and that's usually everything that you've got that's related to internship. Some of it can come from your artifact development. And then they use in the rubric, it has and every time. So it says the rubric uses and between the statements of requirements. So it says reflective analysis of course content in relation to the awareness and development of the competencies. And it includes a description of clinical experiences and how they related to the awareness and development of competencies. And it addresses 12 competencies that were evidenced in the artifact. So this is where you are tying the different facets of the program together. They basically have been the exact same in all of them, but I think when you all got started, that was not pushed. So just make sure that you learn from our class, and then you do what nobody has to tell you again. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew how much I had enjoyed working with you this semester. And I really do hope you have a very successful remainder of your program and that you will be very successful school administrators. And just as a follow-up, I think Gardner-Webb will send you something that they ask you to fill out about the instructors. Please do that. And then just double check and make sure you've completed all your assignments and everything's been turned in. So have a great rest of the summer, what little bit it is. And does anyone else have anything to say or add, or are you ready to get off so you can go do something else?
I just want to say thank you, Dr. Todd. I appreciate everything you've done this semester.
You are very welcome. I have thoroughly enjoyed having all of you. All right. I will stop the sharing and I will end the meeting, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your program. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.